Hello and welcome to this introductory course in cognitive psychology, which is titled Basic Cognitive Processes. I am Dr. Ark Verma from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. I am an assistant professor of psychology. Now, today's lecture is titled Introduction to Cognitive Psychology. We will talk about what cognitive psychology is actually about. But before we get deeply involved in the topics in cognitive psychology and what these basic cognitive processes are, let us ask a more basic question. The basic question is, what is psychology? Now, if you take this question around and you take this question to your colleagues, your family members and people around you, you will actually get a variety of responses. For example, some of them could tell you that psychology is about knowing and predicting people's behaviors. In this comic strip here, you might see that both the rat and the lab experimenters are having a sense of controlling each other's behavior. They seem to know that they are doing something which will actually predict this next person's behavior. That is one way. Another response that a lot of students in psychology get, and a lot of students get actually really enraged by this, is that a lot of people would come and tell you that psychology is about reading people's mind. But at some point or the other, people would actually go out and say that yes, I am a student of psychology, but that does not mean that I can read your mind. Psychology is not really about reading people's mind, though it might help you in other ways. One of the last answers about what is psychology you could get is that psychology could shape people's behavior in social situations. You might see this example here which says, and there is a placard which says that please throw your litter on the ground or on the grass, but it actually gets the exact opposite effect. Okay, so this is also one of the examples which psychology, or one of the applications which psychology has. Moving ahead, but is psychology just about behavior modification? I would say no, it actually offers you much more. We will see what. What is the subject matter of psychology then? Let us begin with the basic definition. Psychology as a science is a science which studies mental processes, experiences and behaviors in different contexts. Okay, now we will visit each of these one by one. What are the mental processes we are talking about? Whether we are talking about just brain activity or mental activity or mental functions, that part is not really clear, but we can take some examples such as learning, remembering, perceiving, feeling, those kinds of things. Those are also examples of what psychology helps you do, or what psychologists actually study. Experiences. What are experiences? Experiences are subjective feelings, what you are feeling at any point in time, what is your awareness. Let us say, for example, I am in this particular room, I see people around me, or I see this screen, or I am seeing and talking to you guys. Okay. Also, psychology could actually help you understand experiences, whether somebody is experiencing a normal state or an altered state, maybe under the influence of a particular drug or something. Or say, for example, very simply put, somebody is feeling rather energetic or active, or some others might be feeling rather passive or sad. All of these comes under the purview of psychology. Coming to behaviors, what are behaviors? Behaviors, most simply put, are responses or reactions to the events and actions in the world. We are surrounded by agents, we are surrounded by people and situations, and how we actually come out acting is basically what is a behavior. It is a rather simple definition which I am taking here. Also, behavior includes sometimes a spontaneous activity in order to achieve various goals or motives. You might have a goal of becoming somebody, or you might have a goal of becoming a cricketer. You will continue and you will have some behaviors which will lead on to you becoming a cricketer. All of that also forms part of what is called behavior. Behaviors can be looked in two ways. One of the ways is either simple or complex behavior. What is a simple behavior? Simple behavior is, say for example, the most typical stimulus plus stimulus and reaction. Say for example, if I ask you to touch the tip of a needle, you will probably try and touch it, but you will take your hand back very quickly. It is in response to you being pricked. On the other hand, I could actually give you a more complex behavior, that being I could ask you to go and make a cup of coffee for me. That is basically a complex behavior which will actually involve a chain of very simple behaviors. Okay. Another way in which you can actually look at behavior is whether behavior is overt or covert. overt behavior simply is the behavior that can be observed by by others, the actions that you do, the things which you say, or say for example, the states that you experience and which you show people. That is overt behavior. Covert behavior on the other hand is something that is typically going on in your mind, things that you are experiencing, feelings of attraction, feelings of anger, disgust, shame, all of that. Or say for example, simply processing the world around you, all of that processing is happening inside your head. That is an example of covert behavior. Now moving ahead, this is a rather commonly asked question, whether psychology is a science or is just about common sense. We get asked this question a lot of times. Now, if psychology were to be common sense, it would be fraught with a few problems. Say for example, confirmation biases. Now, one of the ways in which you can describe a confirmation bias is that it is your internal yes man. If you say for example, develop a particular opinion or a theory about something in the world, some person which you know, you will actually look for and collect evidence that agrees with your perspective or that agrees with your point of view. That basically is a confirmation bias. Okay. Another problem with common sense is basically stereotypes. Okay. Say for example, people have particular opinions and actually look at the world through those opinions. Say for example, a most common stereotype that you might have heard or come across a few times is the aspect of is for example the fact that females are bad drivers. Okay, this is one of the most common stereotypes that you will hear. So for example, if somebody comes and tells you that there has been an accident near your house and there was a woman involved, automatically some of you will make the conclusion that the woman must be at fault in this accident. However, close examination and scientific observation might tell you that this might not be the case. So psychology in that sense is slightly different from common sense. I would say much different from common sense actually. Okay. Moving ahead, let us talk about how psychology is actually structured as a discipline. As a discipline, basically psychology seeks to understand and explain how the mind works and how the different mental processes lead to different behaviors. Okay, psychology tries also in that sense to minimize biases in the explanation of behavior and experience in a variety of ways. You saw that how psychology is different from common sense in the last slide. However, psychology also recognizes the importance of subjectivity in some cases, though always trying to develop a scientific understanding of those phenomena. So psychology basically draws from two streams of knowledge. Okay, one which makes use of methods in physical and biological sciences, and the other which uses methods of social and cultural sciences while studying a variety of psychosocial phenomena. In the first case, psychology focuses largely on biological principles to explain human behavior, things like how is the brain function, what is the response to various neurotransmitters in the brain and stuff like that. On the other hand, psychology focuses on how behavioral phenomena can be explained in terms of the interaction that takes place between the person and the social context. How is the person behaving when he is alone, or compared to how does the person behave when he is confronted with a group of people, when he is part of a larger group, those kind of phenomena. As a science, psychology applies what is called the scientific method. It emphasizes objectivity. It emphasizes that your opinions should be based on facts, your opinion should be based on measurements, that basically which is called empiricism. In its go, psychology uses a particular method, or it basically functions around a particular model which has been called the hypothetico-deductive model. So let us have a look at this model for a while. This is what this model looks like. Okay, so it basically begins with some kind of literature review. You actually look into literature, you actually see what is what are the questions people have asked, you actually look to see what are the papers people have published, what are the topics that people have been interested in studying and to what extent they have actually studied them, what are the questions relevant to those topics and how people have approached those questions. Then basically you move on to formulating your own research question on the basis of whatever literature you actually studied. You move on to design an empirical study. It could be an observational study or it could be a basic experiment. We will talk about these things later as we go on into the course. And then once you conduct an experiment, you get some data. you get some measurements, you analyze those data, you analyze that data, and basically that helps you reach particular conclusions. Once you reach a particular conclusion, now you also have to say something about that particular topic. This then gets added to this body of research literature, which people coming after you might again review to conduct their own research questions. That is what psychology broadly uses as a method. Once we move on, we will actually talk about these kind of methods in more detail. Finally, let us talk about what psychology attempts to understand. So, psychology basically attempts to understand two things: mind and behavior. And basically the questions in psychology which are asked are around this dichotomy: what is mind, what is behavior. Okay, so let us take a bit of a pause and ask these questions. What is mind, or what are the functions of the mind, or how does one really study this concept called mind? This probably or these three questions basically form the core of the topic or core of the topics in cognitive psychology that we will be focusing in this course. So, let us move from here and let us ask a question like, what is cognitive psychology? What are you going to study in this course? What am I going to talk about in the coming lectures? Now, cognitive psychology basically has been simply defined as a science, is basically defined as the branch of psychology which is devoted to the scientific study of the mind. Okay. What is mind? You remember we asked this question. So, let us actually move on to a simple definition. Let us try and construct a simple definition of what is mind. Please note the following instances, the use of this term called mind. I'll actually say some sentences. One of them, say for example, he was able to call to mind what he was doing on the day of the accident. Okay, in this sentence you see that the person is referring to mind as memory. The person is actually trying to bring to mind or recall what is involved in that particular accident. Let us take the second sentence. If you put your mind to it, I am sure you can solve that maths problem. In this case, you see that the person is actually taking mind as a problem solver. So, the mind must be able to help you solve particular problems, the mind must be able to help you take particular decisions, have a particular algorithm, take particular steps, and then reach a final goal. Moving on, I have not made up my mind yet, or say for example, I am of two minds about this. This is basically again an instance in which mind is being used to make decisions or consider or evaluate possibilities. Okay, so this is again one of the functions of the mind. Another sentence here could be, he is of sound mind and body, or when he talks about his encounter with aliens, it seems like he is out of his mind. Okay. Here you can see that the sense is that a healthy mind is being associated with normal functioning and a non-functioning mind is being associated with abnormal functioning. Now, these are two different things, parts of which we will definitely touch in this course, but to tell you that basically the mind then means something which is capable of taking good decisions or say something which helps you stay connected with the reality. Okay. So, what exactly then we know about mind? Let us on the basis of the statements we actually heard, let us try and construct a basic definition of mind. A simple definition would be, the mind creates and controls mental functions such as perception, attention, memory, emotions, language, deciding, thinking and reasoning. Now, all of these terms basically are different mental functions which we will talk about in more detail in the coming lectures. Also, you can look at the mind as a system that creates representations of the world so that we can act within it to achieve our particular goals. So, mind is also a motivator of sorts. Okay. We will probably touch this definition as well when we go into the further lectures. We have talked about these different mental functions. So, let us ask what these different mental functions are. To understand what these different mental functions are, let me take you to a practical example. Okay. So, take a moment, read what is here and I will just read it along with you. So, as Raphael is walking across the campus talking to Susan on his cell phone about meeting at the student union later this afternoon, he remembers that he left the book that she had lent him at home. I can't believe it, he thinks. I can see it sitting there on my desk where I left it. I should have put it in my backpack last night when I was thinking about it. As he finishes his call with Susan and makes a mental note to be on time for their appointment, his thoughts shift to how he is going to survive after Wednesday when his car is scheduled to go into the shop. Renting a car offers the most mobility but is expensive. Bumming rides from his roommates is cheap but is rather limiting. Perhaps I'll pick up a bus schedule at the student union, he thinks, as he puts his cell phone back in the pocket. Entering his anthropology class, he remembers that an exam is coming up soon. Unfortunately, he still has a lot of reading to do, so he decides that he won't be able to take Susan out to the movies tonight, as they had already planned, because he needs time to study. As the lecture begins, Raphael is anticipating with some anxiety his meeting with Susan and how he is going to tell her about this decision. Now you see, this is a description of a lot of small little things which are happening at one particular moment in somebody's mind. You can actually put yourself in this situation at any point in time or throughout the day. You can pick up yourself and just examine one such instance. You will realize that at one particular point in time, a lot of different things are going on through your mind. Okay, so let us try and see what all is happening here, what all mental functions are taking place. This is a figure of what different things Raphael is doing as he is walking across the campus. So you will see that he is understanding conversation because he is on the phone. He is visualizing his book on the desk which is left. He is thinking that he has to be on time for the appointment, maybe because that will lead to complications. He is also remembering Susan's book. By the way, he is walking in the campus, so he is actually perceiving the campus scenes so as to avoid bumping into people and falling off. Also, you saw that he was thinking about his car problem. So he is doing a variety of things. He is doing he is basically engaged in something called complex behavior at this point in time. So what all is Raphael doing actually? Let us boil down to that. He is perceiving his environment. He is basically seeing people on campus walking. He is also listening to Susan talking on the phone. He is paying attention to one thing after the other. The person approaching his left, what Susan is saying, and how much time is left for the class. So he is actually paying attention to these different facts at the same time while he is involved in this conversation on the phone. Also, Raphael is remembering, he is remembering things from the past, that he has told Susan that he was going to return her book today. He is thinking of how he will get the book back, or say for example how he has left the book on his table. Those kind of things he is actually going through in his memory. He is also doing something interesting. He is distinguishing different items in a category when he thinks about different possible forms of transportation. So he actually is comparing these possibilities, whether he should take a rental car, whether he should take help get a ride with his roommate, or say for example he should go with the bus. So he is actually also evaluating possibilities in here. Also, he is visualizing, he is basically thinking of where he had left the book on his desk. He can actually see, okay, I left the book there, I just forgot to keep it in my backpack while I slept in the last night. He is understanding and producing language, something very complex. He is actually thinking to himself, understanding what Susan is saying and also answering her back. So he is doing these three things at the same point in time. He is understanding whatever is whatever Susan is saying, whatever he is thinking, and also he is actually producing language while talking back to Susan. Also, you saw that Raphael is working to solve a problem as he thinks about how to get to places while his car is in the shop. Okay, he actually has a problem at hand, and while the conversation is definitely going on, he also needs to evaluate these different possibilities. Finally, he actually comes to a decision. So decision making is also involved here. He decides to postpone his going to the movies with Susan tonight because he has to prepare for the exam that is going to come afterwards. So you will see, in a particular moment in time, we are involved in a variety of mental functions. We are involved in variety of these different decisions we have to take. We are also doing a lot of things at the same point in time. While you are watching this lecture on the your laptop or your computer, you are actually doing the same thing as probably Raphael is doing in this particular example. You are remembering something, you are perceiving the video, you are listening to the audio, trying to understand what I am saying, also thinking to yourself. You are also making decisions on whether, say for example, to continue, whether you like the course or whether you do not like it. Those different kinds of things you are doing at this same moment. This basically is what is the crux of cognitive psychology. This is basically what we are going to study in the coming lectures. So if this interests you, it might actually help to hang on. Now let us come to the end. Let us try and talk about whether and what cognitive psychology actually does. Okay, so let us take into account the earlier definition of what cognitive psychology is, the definition of what mind is, and the definition of mental functions, and we can conclude that cognitive psychology is the study of mental functions. Okay, is the study of mental functions, for example, attention, learning, memory, visualization or mental imagery. It is a study of language, it is a study of problem solving when you have a problem at hand, and it is also the study of decision making. Okay, so in cognitive psychology, these are the different topics, these are basically the names of the different chapters we will actually be studying in more detail. Okay, each of these are specific cognitive functions, and we will actually look into how do we study these different cognitive functions, what are the different ways of understanding these cognitive functions, and so on. So with this in mind, we will actually go on to the next lecture in a next time, which is basically going to be about history of cognitive psychology. We will talk about what is the what is the history of the thought which basically governs cognitive psychology. We will actually look into a bit of a history of psychology, how psychology developed from philosophy. We will also look into how cognitive psychology or this cognitivist perspective of psychology emerged from the earlier schools of psychology. That is all. We will see you in the next class.